Hello, my name is Carol May Whittick, your creativity and spiritual life coach and your host of Her Conversations Tools for the Awakening. HER is an acronym for Higher Energetic Resonance. This is the optimal state to embody in order to attract our highest desires. What is the awakening? This is the moment in time when humanity rises up out of the darkness. Who is awakening? Each one of us present on Earth today, reclaiming our sovereignty, seeking greater possibilities in our reality and looking for solutions. We know being awakened is not a lofty ideal but a necessity. If we can transform ourselves, we can change the world. Guests on Her Conversations will speak to your spirituality, sensuality and soul. Listen to their stories and hear how they are in service to the world. Let their words and these conversations embolden and inspire you. Before we go into this episode with Saloni Surah, I just want to share with you some ways that I can support you. First, if you are listening to this prior to 7 p.m. UK time on Tuesday the 10th of September, there is still time to join up for this month's Creative Confidence Masterclass. This month I'm focusing on spirituality for creativity. There's a list in the show notes to join up for this month's masterclass, but also to be alerted for any future masterclasses. I will usually run them on the second Tuesday or Wednesday of each month, helping you to rediscover deeper creative abilities, explore spiritual practices to enhance your creativity, and build a stronger connection with your intuition. When you come to recognize yourself as a spiritual being, you can then confidently integrate creativity into all aspects of your life. And if you haven't already, I invite you over to listen to the sister podcast to Her Conversations, Her Inspirations. Each week I explore a different aspect of our spiritual and creative journeys. Links are below in the show notes. My guest on this week's episode is Saloni Surah, a former doctor and coach who works intuitively with a mix of EFT, energy work, crystal healing, tarot and dowsing. She's a change agent whose work is deeply powerful and transformative. She has also authored magic-imbued children's books and a bullying personal development book. During our conversation, Saloni shares about her journey from horrific workplace bullying, PTSD and birth trauma, hitting rock bottom and starting again. Her mission now is to inspire and help others grow and learn. So as always, I begin by asking my guest, HER is an acronym for Higher Energetic Resonance. When do you feel that higher energetic resonance?
It's a really good question. It depends. So this morning I went out to the park across the road. Usually it's in the woods, but I went out to the park across the roads because I was time limited. And I got up this morning, I sat next to a tree on the ground, had the feet on the ground and was just like, yeah, it's flowing. But it can vary. Usually it involves being outdoors and or taking time to myself, I think. And often for me, it's with crystals too.
Beautiful. Well, you can tell me more about that as it goes on anyway. But before we get into the deeper conversation, Saloni, I just want to give you an opportunity to share about you, who you are, what got you to the point that you are at now, doing the work that you're doing now.
Yes. Okay. So it's a long story. I am a former doctor, so I'm a HIV consultant physician in HIV and sexual health. I have a PhD in HIV and drug use. I've done a lot of stuff in the medical field. So I've worked in prisons. I was a rape examiner for a bit. I've traveled quite a bit. I'm also a coach and an author. So I started coaching about, actually it is 10 years ago now. And I kind of fell into it through EFT work that I was doing at the time. And I write. So I've published my first kids book last year, but I do a mixture of stuff. So I've got kids and self-help. So I'm trying to get some of those out now that my children are getting a little bit older.
Let's talk about the main core of the work that you're doing now. What is it specifically that somebody would contact you for at this moment?
Okay, so the work that I tend to do, it tends to be a variety of stuff, but usually power issues, bullying issues, or sexual trauma. And I just about 3 weekends ago trained in EMDR therapy, which is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing therapy. And the reason I did that was because I myself had PTSD. And that was the only thing that really worked. So it really gave me my life back. And then I went back and had it for my birth trauma. So because it was so powerful, I found a course locally that was doing it. And I thought, I'm going to do this. The work that I do is very intuitively based, and it's a mixture of tapping, modality dowsing work, really what's coming up. I'm a change agent, so there's a lot of coaches that will work with people for a long time. That's not me. Usually, people come to me for short periods. They may then come back, but it will bring change in. Not that I don't like working with people long term, but I usually find that it's a kind of a shorter period, but that's a bit more intensive.
Mm.
But the core issues tend to be around power, sexual trauma, which often is also that power interplay as well. Obviously, with my medical background, I've looked after so many individuals that have been sexually assaulted or sexually abused. I've pretty much heard it all. So yes, but it can vary. So sometimes I've just worked with clients who just, are businessmen and just want to be a bit more successful and a bit happier. But yeah, there's the core of my stuff, and it kind of weaves in with my books as well. So I do have, I had a bad workplace bullying, which was why I ended up with the PTSD. So I do have a book on bullying that I need to get out there. And my first book, it's a funny girl detective for 6 to 9 year olds, books about a girl who has to find a missing gold egg laying chicken. But it's also a book about a girl who has a dream, reaching for dreams, because I've seen so many individuals who are illiterate, living in abject poverty, who probably never had anyone tell them they can do things, who don't get read to at night. And also, I wanted a different kind of role model for my children, because women as role models are very kind of stereotypical that we see out there in the kind of the mainstream media. So she's a bookish girl. And then my fairy book, which I am working on, well, I'm doing another round of edits at the moment, is a book about clip-wing fairies, and really, how we all get our wings clipped at some point, and how we get them back, especially when it's often done by people who are supposed to love us.
There are a couple of questions going through my mind as well, but I want to start with the workplace, really, because I would say the vast majority, like the highest percentage of guests that I have on this podcast are usually doing something of their own. The majority of them would have had a journey through some sort of job,
Yeah,
they would have worked for someone in either, whether it's just, just a kind of everyday job, or then it more into a bigger organization and a corporate structure. But there always tends to be this similar pattern of all of this kind of workplace bullying, workplace trauma, workplace just, all of the stuff that we don't heal gets brought into the workplace. And it's almost like the schoolyard kind of
yeah,
expands into the workplace, and then what we don't heal, which a lot of us don't start
yeah,
working on healing until we get pushed right into a corner, and then we realize that there's a way out. Then we do something about it. We start healing. We maybe look at the job and go, maybe I can't stay here for my own health, that health of
yeah.
myself, and then for the health of the people that are dependent on me. And like you said about power,
Mm.
that kind of power struggle that will invariably, that's why we usually push back, is we feel disempowered, and it's the way that we respond to the way that we're feeling disempowered.
Yeah.
And some of us do it in varying different ways. Some of us push back, some of us shrink down, but we're all kind of responding to trying to find our way.
Yeah.
Um, in your work, or just in your
Yes.
experience, what have you noticed about that, and what can be changed? And are you part of that with the work that you do?
So, workplace bullying, unfortunately, is common. And like you say, it is a continuation of childhood and school. And certainly in my situation, it was, I think a continuation of how I was treated as a child, how I was expected to be treated, and also kind of, cultural norms, if I'm being honest with you. Um, I think the shame about this is that we're at epidemic proportions with it, and it's dealt with so badly by employers and managers.
Mm.
And instead of just going, right, we've got a problem, let's get people in, let's get psychological support, especially in sectors like mine, where the government run, they're usually appallingly dealt with. And what often happens is there's a second lot of bullying and ghosting and gaslighting. So one of the things that I find the hardest about my work situation wasn't just the bullying, it was all the individuals that I went to for help. I'm somebody who goes with solutions. So I don't just go, this is happening. At multiple points have said, refer individuals on, let's get people in, this can all be resolved. But nobody wanted to do that. And by the time often you realize it's too late. So, because I was working part-time, because I was coaching, because I was writing, I think it meant that I was able to live with it for longer than I should have done.
Mm-hmm.
And so by the time I realized it was too late. So I think, that's the massive shame about this, is because, this doesn't go away. It just goes to another workplace if you move that individual on, or more people come in and it happens to them. And the whole workplace becomes toxic. People replicate it. It becomes normal place. It becomes unprofessional. And it causes a massive amount of trauma. It'd be substantially cheaper to do what I had suggested. We could have all been back at work. None of us, all the only people who win are the lawyers who make money, So I just think the whole system is broken. I know I've had individuals say to me, well, you can't make people change. And you're right, you can't, but you can make them take responsibility for the impact their behavior has on others. And you can say that's not acceptable to do in the workplace, and it's not okay to talk to people like that. And we won't facilitate it. That's not allowed. So I think those are some of the issues that I've found. I'm not alone, unfortunately, with that. By and large, it's substantially cheaper to get people in, to get the psychological support in, had they paid for the EMDR therapy and actually diagnosed my PTSD years ago, it would have caused me a huge amount of lot less trauma. The workplace would have been a lot better. And it also negatively impacted on my children because I was in a bad place when I had them. So I think, that's a shame. And wouldn't it be amazing if we could have situational workplaces where they do actually deal with it, where HR are HR, and we just get people in and go, right, okay, maybe this is the way you are, but you can't behave like this in the workplace. It's not acceptable. This is how your behavior is impacting on other people. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I tend to find that it's often women with mother issues who maybe have been dominant or have been bullied by their mother or have had narcissistic parents, or there is some power imbalance in families because, it happens. There is bullying in families. Let's not pretend there isn't. And, often that's a pattern that gets replicated because that's all you're used to. That's what you think is normal.
I wanted to just drop back into the workplace. It was something that I read on LinkedIn, actually, over the past couple of days. And it was just a mention of somebody talking about how ineffective exit interviews are when people are leaving an organization because of toxicity within that, but still they don't feel that there's any point at that point anyway, so they're kind of like having this well, what happened and how do you feel and how can we support you? Whereas from every job situation that I've had, which have not been many before I just went my own way, has been I couldn't wait to get out the door. And, if anyone would have sat down and gone into or asked me questions about what it was and what the reasons were why I felt that I had to leave, it would be at that point, one, it's too little too late because what can be done about it? Two, then you're speaking to the people who are the creators of the problem anyway. So they're not going to implement any change as you leave. And also possibly, there's all this, even though it won't be official, people talk, and if you move from one organization to another and you kind of say why you left, because usually when you go to a new interview, you're not necessarily going to trash where you're leaving. You have a very kind of like flowery, professionally worded way of saying that these people are crazy, toxic, and I can't wait to leave them, but it's never really stated. So then everyone's kind of walking around with this unspoken trauma, and it's just kind of perpetuating itself, and then everyone's pretending that everything's okay. So, you're keeping all of this stuff down, you're not being honest, you're probably then going into a situation where you have to lie about where you came from, nothing's resolved, you don't feel heard. And these are, if we just look at just personal development and healing in general, are usually the things that we have to bring to the surface to actually heal and move forward. And looking at how the workplace or society in general needs to up level, needs to heal, needs to awaken. What can be done about the workplace situation so that they don't lag behind in where people could be going? Or, like, the vast majority of your time is going to be spent at work anyway. So you're going to be spending the vast majority of the time going into a toxic situation. And then, like you say, bringing those unresolved feelings back to your family. And then they're going to bear the brunt of it, because then that's the only place that you feel safe enough to kind of go, and it's affecting everybody. And yet we're trying to move forward at the same time.
So there are workplaces that do manage it. That's certainly not my experience, but I think there are workplaces that manage it. There are people that come in and assist with this. There are, I think even just a decent psychologist would have been able to manage this. I think it depends on the structure and the organization you're in. And like you say, if you're in that kind of toxic situation, organization, and your management are not listening, it's not going to get better. And also, like you say, you're left with that trauma and having to process it. I think my experience of mine is that I should have gone sooner. The way my work was structured, it was challenging because there wasn't really anywhere else that I could have worked in that country because of what I did. And, like you say, those are the challenges. And that, because of the way it's been panned out at times and the smallness of the area of medicine that I worked in, it's meant that I it's over for me. Now, at some point, I probably would have exited anyway, or continued my part-time because I was doing my other stuff. But, I just can't face going and seeing, individuals, because I'm somebody who's like, this has happened, and I'm not going to pretend it's not. I don't want to be there having a screaming match at you, but I'm not going to sit at you over the table and pretend you weren't there when I was in the middle of mediation and you basically let somebody attack me verbally for an hour. So I think it's challenging because we don't tend to manage it properly. Or certainly, I don't know many people that have had it managed properly. I think it can be done if there's honesty and if you get, I think it's very hard to do it in-house. Like, you need external people to come in and to manage it. So psychologists and people that know what they're doing who can like I say, make people look at the impact their behavior is having on others and be very clear that behavior is not acceptable in the workplace. But it's challenging, especially if it's a small workplace. And it's challenging to heal from it. I mean, you can, and there are various, things that you can do. I found the EMDR very helpful. I found a lot of forgiveness helpful too. But, like you say, you've got to let that anger and that upset and that hurt out first before you're able to get into that place. And, I did a lot of tapping, I tried a lot of stuff. I think it's a process and a journey,
You were transitioning, so you didn't have to just walk out into like the Wild West because you had the coaching and you had the writing that you were doing alongside that work. Is that right?
I did, but my income was primarily my medical career, because, I'd obviously worked a long time for that. And I had made a conscious choice when I went back as a consultant that I didn't want to be full-time. That I needed, I was single at that point. I needed time for me. And I wanted, my creative endeavors that actually made me a better doctor. And I just wanted time for me. Let's be honest with you. So that I had never... Well, I hadn't, never invested a huge amount in making those financially viable prior to that, because, the medical career took up most of the time and that paid well, considering, I spent a long time training there. I was pitching to agents during that time. And obviously I didn't know I had PTSD. So that didn't put me in a great position to pitch sorry, to pitch and to sell myself really. And in the end, I self-published my first book, which is something I thought I would never do. But where my life was after having recovered from the PTSD, the birth trauma, having had my children, still being stuck in this situation of it not being resolved, I just thought I'm going to do this and move on. You know, I didn't want to wait 2 years for a publisher. The publishing world is an interesting market, but it's certainly the last agent I pitched to had said, you know, celebrities were selling this age range. And I thought, look, I'm just going to do this. And it was, you know, good. It had its challenges as well. So it, you know, for me to be on social media after the bullying, and I'd been stalked as well, was a big thing. You know, obviously I didn't have much of a following. So trying to get traction and visibility in a really crowded market, you know, Amazon's been wonderful for self-publishing, but it, you know, it's a big market. And, you know, my books and work, you know, I've had them professionally edited over the years, feedback. I've done a lot of courses and conferences. I know there's a lot of people who have, like me, but there's also a lot of individuals who haven't, who will just go and do it and put books out. So, yeah.
Mm-mm. So tell me more about that side of yourself, the author, the creative.
Okay, yes. So it was something that surprised me. It's a funny, strange story. When I was in med school, I think it was around about 2000, I did a BSc for a year. So you used to be able to go into the final year of another degree when you're in med school and do a research project, do that final year, because you did a lot of did pharmacology, you did a lot of the baseline science in your first 2 years of med school. And I had a nice long summer. So I went backpacking around Australia. It was my first year backpacking. And my granddad passed the night before we were due to go. And this was obviously well before mobile phones and stuff. So it was touch and go as to whether or not I was going to go. But I did go. Very glad that I did. But obviously was very upset that my granddad had passed. And I was with a couple of friends and we found ourselves at a psychic in Manly in Sydney, of all places. And I remember her saying to me, you know, you're going to be a writer. And I was like, absolutely no way. At that point now, my life was planned out for me. And, you know, I'd been followed, pushed, pursued a very kind of scientific path. So I'd get told this from time to time. And then when I started writing my PhD, about 13 years ago, was when I started to write. And I think it was probably because I was able to manage my own time. So it was a challenging PhD, you know, because of the cohort I was working with, but it meant I could manage my own time. So I started writing then. So this is my fourth book that I published. It's one of my younger age group ones. Yeah, so it was a bit of a journey. This one was based on my husband's friends and family. So my husband is Italian, and my mother-in-law used to keep chickens. The foxes have had them all now. And one day, one of the chickens went missing, and my husband joked that there had been murder in the back garden to his brother. And his brother was like, "What?" And then he realised that he was talking about the chickens. So when we went back to Florence, I met all the friends and the families and the cats and the parrots and all this stuff. I totally parodied them all and wrote a book about it and created a girl detective. So yeah, that's Flora.
I love it. So why did you choose children's books and writing for children?
That's just what I started to write. So it surprised me too. I think because at that time I was in the middle of doing my PhD and I was doing really heavy scientific writing. And if you've done any scientific writing, it's, you know, this is the aim, this is the introduction, this is the hypothesis, this is the methods, this is the results and the conclusion. And it's really formulaic. And I think I just wanted a total contrast. So I started writing about fairies and dragons and all of that stuff. I mean, I do have some adult stuff. I'm just trying to finish off some of my old back catalogue, you know, because obviously having two young children means I don't get that much time to write now. I think it was just probably my little girl wanted to just go and play with fairies and have fun, really.
Mm, beautiful. I just love talking about creativity, as you can imagine anyway.
Yeah.
So that always kind of sparks, you know, a connection with people and understanding how their creativity came through or what kind of like pulled them into that area and things like that. And then the coaching side of you as well. So there's like this kind of like multi-hyphenate working as well, which I think is great as well. That's what I think is like the for me, it's always been I do this and this and this and this and
Yeah.
this, and it just kind
Yeah.
of keeps it all going. But
Yeah.
and as different as things might seem, they actually really have a very tight connection, I find. Anyway, I can
Yeah.
think of all of the things that I do that look like they're on one end of the spectrum,
Yeah.
but I can see how they span from the same center.
Yeah.
They're not different at all. They feed into each other. And also, like you say, by having something that seems a little bit lighter, when one thing kind of gets a bit intense and a bit heavy, you can just kind of take
Absolutely.
the pedal off the gas a bit and go into something else. But in leaving that alone for a moment, then when you go back there, you're actually invigorated by something that might seem completely disconnected, but actually allows you to see where you might have been stuck in one thing in a different way. And I think that's one of the things that I love about just being able to just keep your hand in lots of different pies and keep stoking different fires and things like that. So how does your creativity, or how does your medical background, or how does even your experience through your work then inform the way that you coach and the healing modalities that you offer?
I think of course it's really integral to it, because you tend to help people who are going through what you've gone through. Not always. I think it's certainly the medical career without a doubt helps. Obviously I don't do private medicine, and I never have. The individuals that I've worked with have certainly not been people that you would. I could have gone and done private sexual health, but it wasn't never really a thing that I was interested in, to be honest with you. You've got somebody, when you're working with me, who's got 20 years of working as a doctor. Like, I've heard it all. I've gone to prisons. I've had people tell me about murdering people. I've had people tell me about, after being sexually abused, people just used to come and talk to me. I did used to integrate a little bit. So, I'd have patients coming in with panic attacks, and I'd just get them to tap. I'd be like, let's just tap on the collarbone and breathe. And, they'd come in absolutely panicked and out. Individuals with chronic pelvic pain that I'd send for kind of yoga and meditation and breath work. So, there's an interplay, and certainly in the sexual health field, you see a lot more psychosomatic, and you see it. I'm also very intuitive. So somebody to walk in, I'd be like, okay, this individual's been sexually abused, or there's a load of grief sitting in their chest as well as that. So you see it. Those of us who work, there are plenty physicians who don't just work on the physical plane. That we all know it's interconnected, and certainly in sexual health, it's an area of medicine where we see that a lot more. There's different specialities where that's not so, and they're incredibly rigid. The coaching is very similar in a way. It's basically, I like transformation and I like helping people. And sometimes with the coaching, you can really help people change their lives. I mean, with the HIV, you could have somebody who's come in very unwell, a new diagnosis, and then a year or two later, much better, and coming in and having their babies, which is a wonderful thing, and you look after them and that. But with the coaching as well, it's a very similar feeling in a way. Obviously, individuals that tend to come for coaching, they want to transform their life. They want to change because they're investing. And so that for me is great, because, I looked after a lot of people whose lives were never going to change because of, their upbringing and where they were and their finances and them, the mentition. It just wasn't going to change. And you could see there was no way, they had no chance with where they had come from for that to change. So with the coaching, it's wonderful to have that, and it's great that I haven't coached for a while, and I'm just opening that space up again now. But the last time I did, I had a whole family come, the teenagers and parents, and I really enjoyed the teenagers, because it made me remember how much I enjoyed working with teenagers and how much fun it was and how funny it was. And it was great that they're all doing well. They don't need me, and that in itself is wonderful, because it's a job well done. And especially the fact that some of them were younger and they all did it as a family, that was hopefully for them as they get older, a normal place, as opposed to me, who had to kind of hit crisis and didn't know how to self-care, because the family that I came in and how I was raised was that you don't look after yourself, and that the men are more important and the boys are more important, the brothers are more important, and you're not good enough and know your place. So it meant hitting crisis, or in my case, being single and going, I really want children, this is ever going to happen, to going, there's a reason here, and I have to go and dig out what this reason is.
Mm.
I have done love work as well for people, so it's yeah, it's a magical thing.
Mm. And it's interesting what you're saying about, the cultural background that you come from as well, and how that can impact how you see the world or how you see your possibilities. Despite the directors or anything like that, there are things that are ingrained that you have to really root out. And that can take a lot, well, it does take a lot of work, especially if you're going up against the expectations of your immediate family and the culture. And I'm also speaking from, experience as well, where in sometimes you have to, well, speaking from my experience, have to like almost really put a big distance between it. Sometimes it's not only just a physical distance, but psychological distance, and almost go and educate myself out of that,
Yeah.
and educate myself out of just go and learn different things, read different books, hang with different people, like eat different food. It was almost like a relearning of a different possibility, but not losing sight of where I come from. And I think, if I'm again talking about my own experience, was then managing the is it disappointment? Managing, like, you want to go somewhere else. I always had a different viewpoint about what was possible for my life, even from a young child as well. And it's really kind of coming back into my mind because I'm writing about it now. And as you kind of go back and write about your life, you really think about things that you may not have remembered so much, and like meditate on that area and go, gosh, that was really different.
Yeah.
And to see where things were really different. But I think the reason why it's kind of come back to me again is that recently there's been a bereavement. So I'm going to have to go back into like the family fold in the next couple of weeks. And that's going to be a thing,
I
and,
hear you.
I'm
back in it right now. Yeah.
So I'm preparing myself for the situation, and more so, the member of the family who passed lived to a great age. She lived to 93.
Wow.
And she lived to a long age with really poor health. So the fact that she made it to that age is actually to be celebrated, and all of the things. But that's not what the issue is going to be for me, and even a couple of weeks ahead of me going into that, I'm mentally preparing myself. I'm literally running through a myriad of scenarios of okay, if that happens, then what? If that happens, then what? Because I know also the image of who people think I am is based on somebody that I actually wasn't when I was a teenager, but it was a perception of me, like of who I was, because I played the game in order to just have the peace. But, that was like 30 odd years ago now. But every now and again, when there's like an event that it's just easier for me to be there than not be there, like, you go there, you show your face, you come out and you go back. But then knowing that I've grown, but knowing that I'm going to see the same things, and just having to breathe and deal, because I know that there's a lot of people who just didn't change, chose, like you say, chose not to change. We didn't have loads of money, but we weren't dirt poor. So there was always the opportunity for you to like find a way out, at least find your way to the next level and the next level, and kind of pull yourself out of that situation if you wanted to. Most chose not to do that. So then when you've kind of gone and done something completely radically different, doing radically different work, have a radically different mindset, and then have to come back, so I can see from your like body, like you're hearing me, like, how do you deal with that? Because I'm literally going into, okay, like, if not that, then I'm literally going through scenarios so that I can prepare, because trust me, even if I go there and say the most ambiguous things, and I'm very careful about language I write, so I know language, I know synonyms for days, but it doesn't really matter. I could say, like, can I find a word that means nothing but the word that I think it means? It will somehow it will create, it's a landmine. You walk and it's like, oh, this looks like a nice rosy field. And somehow your leg gets blown off.
I hear you. I'm in it again, and I've I don't know if there's an answer. For me, it's exiting. I've had to kind of exit.
Mm,
But every so often, like you say, you get pulled back in. What I find challenging is it's when the other family members who are a similar age to me, who you would expect to not perpetuate do, I find that tough. And certainly in my family, we just don't talk about it. So terrible, terrible things are done, but we're just not going to talk about it. And that drives me up the wall because I'm somebody that's like, I can't sit and look at you and pretend it's all okay. And so this morning when I was out in the thing, that was what was on my mind because I've been triggered by, family members returning and, having to deal with, children as well, which is a wonderful thing, but also minding myself. And, I don't want my children to see that. I don't want them to know subconsciously that's the case. I don't want them, in our family, they controlled with money. That is not happening. So it's a really fine line of, keeping your kids safe and, keeping yourself centered and pulling back to that center because it's very easy to go back into those patterns and routines, especially if, like me, you're a people pleaser and you want to make people happy. And individuals don't want you to change and they want you to play that same role because it benefits them. And, they want to not behave nicely and not own it and pretend that you're the one that is the issue. So I don't have a golden answer for that. I think the more that we talk up about it or say no or just disengage, but, I personally find it incredibly challenging when hugely abusive things have been done and people pretend to me they've not been done, especially when it's been done to me, and it's all supposed to be okay. And you're supposed to want everything from me and I'm supposed to do everything for you. And it's not.
Yeah. And I suppose it it mirrors what we were speaking about the workplace, going back to that state where everyone knows something happened, no one talks about it. We just, it's in the past, but it actually isn't in the past because that person is still maintaining that feeling or that idea or knows the ways to try and bring you back to that point. And like I said, like I just kind of created the physical space and then the space by just developing myself out of it so I could see what it was, but it still doesn't change the fact that going back into that situation is I'm going to be outnumbered. I'm going to be outnumbered. I'm not going there with anyone else other than myself because one, I wouldn't want to bring anyone there. I don't need like moral support.
Yes.
Even though if I brought a friend or somebody else with me, then it probably wouldn't happen as much because then this best behavior turns up, which is basically just lying.
Yes, I hear you. I hear you.
So I could, but why should I like drag one of my friends in to be like my battle shield? It's like they don't deserve that. So I, just go and like kind of curl up and let the things play out. But I'm literally like organizing the like, okay, like how can I do? And it's not an easy trip to make in one day, but if that's what it needs to be, it's like we've got to go like, turn up, show up, go, oh, I've got a train book, got to get back, this whole kind of thing for your own self-preservation.
Self-care. So it's self-care. I mean, I think it is that, right, booking a session with somebody, going to the woods, knowing it is going to be challenging. Again, like I'm not doing the full thing. I'm just getting in and I'm getting out and showing my face. But I'm not fully partaking. For me, I had to just go, right, I have to focus on the children, that, and I'm not talking about mine, but it's minimizing. So I minimize time and I do it. I choose when. Do you know what I mean? But it's still challenging. So last night, this morning, I was like, oh gosh, right, okay, I'm triggered. I can feel the anger here. I can feel this. I've got to go and process it. I've got to go and honor it because anger is actually a very powerful emotion because it's usually somebody telling you that somebody's done something to you. I'm saying anger, not rage, because, rage is different. And
Mm.
I've been on the receiving end of rage in the workplace, and that's entirely different. But again, when you bring up the workplace, certainly in my workplace, it wasn't the first time bullying had happened, with the individuals concerned, even in the department with different individuals. It wasn't the first time, it was woefully mismanaged. And that's a pattern. So in workplaces like those, it just won't change. There are different workplaces, and I think there are places that do change. But yes, I think self-care. So good luck.
Yeah.
But have some nice things planned, or a
Oh
healing
yeah.
or whatever for after. I think that's the only way you can deal with it. And like what you're saying, doing it there, I'm coming back. It's going to be an intense day. I'm going to come back, have a salt bath,
Mm.
whatever you need to get through it.
Yeah. And I think with when something like that is on the horizon, because um it's also, to me, like, I'm like, okay, I'll see how much of this work I've been doing on myself it's actually working. Because it's all well and good when I'm in my peaceful bubble and I'm around the people that are nurturing and all this kind of stuff and it's controllable. But then when life goes, okay, you need to just go into the den for a little while, like,
Yeah.
are you equipped enough to deal with all of the things? And I think, and I used to do it actually when I had last time that I had jobs where I knew that there was just going to be cantankerous people in the room that I had to deal with. It was almost like running a scenario before you got there. It's like like rehearsing the responses, and how can I deal with that? Obviously, in a workplace, you're kind of sitting in the room for 8 hours a day dealing with all the stuff, so it's not as there's not as easy a get out. But with this as well, it will be interesting. But so when you said about the children, and I don't have children myself, but there's a generation, or actually two burgeoning generations now underneath or behind me, that I wonder what they're seeing and they're they're going to develop out of it, or what their lives are going to be like, and hope also that they don't have to go through another cycle of this mess, for them. And but there's no, because they're not my direct children, there's nothing really that I can do. And also because I'm a fleeting figure, I do I have any authority to go, well, this kind of thing? But um it's just also interesting as well, just seeing how, one generation has now gone, really, the matriarch level, that's it, they've all passed.
Yeah.
So now, like, we're kind of sitting at that level now as well. It's like, are we making this better? Because we always swore that we would never be like that, but clearly we're doing the same things, and no one's really talking about it. We're still kind of doing everything that we saw ahead of us. So if we can't do it for ourselves, how can we do it for others? I hear people use different words. In the times that we're in now, there are a lot of like words that people use, like buzzwords and everything like that. Over time, I can tell where people are using words to use words, and then people are using words to talk about their experience.
Yeah.
And they're not always the same, because we can all talk and we can all post a nice quote on social media, but does that actually mean that we're as deeply healed and as profoundly aware of ourselves as we would like to be, or as we would like other people to believe as well? So I don't know where I'm going with this. I'm just kind of thinking of future awakenings around us, all of us, like within myself, within how I relate to other people who I find challenging, but also within the world, with all the things that are happening now, with all of the division that keeps getting pushed in the media, like at the moment, like Britain, oh my God, where it's just a breaking point that could really go in a dark place, and it feels like it's being kind of forced on us. Like, how can we stand in our own sovereignty and things like that?
I think I feel too like it is being forced. So I actually don't read the papers, and haven't for a long time, because I don't believe most of what I read in there. There is hope. My children, my children are like I was, but they have an entirely different parent. And so they will say if they feel unsafe. And they know that I will take it seriously. So I won't put them in that situation. And, I had that with a nursery recently. It caused a huge amount of turmoil for me and my husband, but we did it, and they know that we'll do it. My children can see. So as 4 or 5 year olds, they will say, this person does this, mummy, and that person does that. And they've totally got the measure of individuals in the family. The difference is that I won't expose them to it. If they say, I don't want to see them, that person, they don't. So it can change. That's, in my case, within a generation. There is hope and it can change, but I'm not saying it's easy. If I think about me growing up, even though on paper it was like, go to med school and you can do whatever you want. No, it was always like, no, you're a playful little girl, you won't earn more money than this, and you won't do better than me, and all of this stuff. And that had a drastic negative impact on my life for a very long time. It's taken me, 40 years to get out of that, even though in my mind I was this empowered woman, because it was so deeply ingrained, which is a shame, but I think that's just different parents. So I think as you heal, you reparent yourself, and then you parent your children differently.
Have you got anything else that you can share with us about the work that you're doing? Is there anything coming up?
I am really looking forward to starting EMDR, but also combining it with coaching clients and, clearing that fight or flight. So for me, that was beautiful to get me out of the fight or flight, to start making decisions, and then starting to work deeper on some of the patterns, because I'm really good at seeing patterns and structures. It's like healthcare. I'm quite good at going in and going, like, these are the issues, which you wouldn't expect, but it's the same thing of these are the recurring themes. So working on a deeper level. So that's really exciting for me. And I only really take 1 or 2 clients on at any time, just because energetics and time. Also with getting my books out and the fairy book, because it's a book about power and having wings taken, which is, yes, it's a fairy book and it's kids, but it's also, it happened to me. It happens to so many of us that we get our wings taken and that we get disempowered, and how do we get them back? And being able to combine that, and getting that out with kids. So I do workshops for my first book, and I'm looking forward to doing workshops for this and trying to incorporate some more personal development for kids. And I know there's lots of books out there for children with affirmations and everything. I mean, I would have loved to have done a bit more of the alternative medical side, and that was where I was going before things were brought to an end, and to combine some of the medical stuff with the tapping. But the medical side of it's currently gone. I don't see that I'll go back. I just think the system has gone too far down a different way. And I personally struggle when I'm accessing healthcare, primarily because of the communication that I find. Certainly when I was receiving maternity care, and even like my husband has a heart condition, so it really shocks me, a lot of that communication that's been put out. I know it's been a very difficult couple of years for everybody, especially those in healthcare, but I think we need to pull it back to people are people, and it's another human in front of you, and how we speak matters. And words are so powerful.
Beautiful. And can you tell us where we can find you, where we can find your books?
Of course, yes. So I have a website, SaloniSurah.com. My first book, Flora Investigates the Case of the Missing Gold Eggs, is available on Amazon as paperback and ebooks. It's also on Kindle Unlimited. My fairy book. Yeah, that's my heart song. So I was going to self-publish it, and it doesn't want to be self-published. The fairies are very particular. And so I am looking for an indie publisher. So I'm looking for the right people, really. And excited. I'm really excited to get that out when the time is right, because it is my heart song. You start talking about creativity. I started writing it years ago. I was going to a writing group in Dublin. Just thought it was going to be a short little fairy book, a break from my dragon book, which I still need to go back and rewrite. And then I went back about a year or two later and was like, oh gosh, I'm writing about my bullying. I didn't realize that, like she has her wings ripped, and that was me having my power taken. And that's kind of that person, but in different situations for me. So I don't know, with your creativity, you suddenly go, oh, that's what that is. I had a painting that I did that I never really liked because I did a Vedic art class and I didn't really know what it was. And then about a year ago, I went, oh, that's my grief on there. Because it was like this lovely bright painting, but I put like this black bit on top of it, like it was all thorny. And I was like, oh, that's my grief. But it took me like 2 years to understand that's what I'd put down on paper. Anyway, I'm digressing. So yes, fairies, yeah, I'm looking for the right home for them. So that I haven't got that yet. So I'm hoping that will be out soon. But I'm having a lot of fun rewriting it and playing with the fairies and scooting down rivers and acorn catapults and things. What else have I been working on this year? Book-wise, I've got to pick up my bullying book again. I picked up my medical memoirs also, and I've got a thriller stalking book, loosely based on my experiences, dual point of view. I started writing both that and the medical book about 6 years ago in Dublin. And my writing group, when I did the thriller book, they were all like, oh, you've got to go back and do that one. But I actually couldn't touch it for so long because I was so traumatized. So I need to go back to that one because I have an agent who wants to read it. So yeah, that's where I am, salonisurah.com. The book's available on Amazon. I'm also on Facebook, Saloni Surah author. I've let TikTok go because I just find it too overwhelming at the moment. Actually, my social media is a bit quiet at the moment because I've been in a kind of writing mode in its summer holidays. So yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing today.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Saloni, for sharing your story and your wisdom with me, and thank you for listening. If you haven't already, please leave a review and also share this episode with somebody you feel will be able to benefit from the gift and the message of my guest. You can find out more about me on my website. It's carolmaywhittick.com, carolmaewhittick.com. Find me on Instagram, CAZMICK, that's Casmic, and Carol May Whittick on LinkedIn and Facebook. Until the next episode, thank you for listening. Take care. Bye-bye.